Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk about, we're going to talk some more about the Galactic Center. I didn't do quite as much, that's not really true. I did research on it this week, for sure. But what I've been looking at it's been so many different moving parts and so many things going through my mind. And I have these ideas, right? But I'd like to find some kind of logical and rational basis for them. So before I throw out too much of what I'm looking at, I want to try to make sense of it myself first, try to find some patterns things that just help connect things, if that makes sense. I have some ideas in my mind, but I haven't formulated them into a blog post. I'm not going to formulate them into videos yet, except for this part here today. And maybe one other one, I'm not totally sure. But there are just so many moving parts that I'm trying to figure out exactly where I'm going with it. So there won't be as many GC videos this week or blog posts. That's why. There's also been an influx of people. There have been more people that have wanted to participate. And thank you so much to everybody that has wanted to participate, that has thrown your chart to me or done the questionnaire and thrown your chart to me. It's not too late to participate if you want to be a part of this. It's never too late. Just if you don't want to do the questionnaire, if you're like, I don't want to fuck with the questionnaire, but you can use my chart, that's fine. You do not have to do the questionnaire. Just let me know, that you want to just throw your chart my way without doing the questionnaire. If you want to do both, let me know and I'll send you the link to the questionnaire. But yeah, there have been more people to take in. The past couple weeks, there have been, beyond just this week, the past couple weeks, there have been more people that have wanted to do it. And this past week, I also spent some time organizing and putting all these people in my files and everything like that. So this week was really more of a week of organizing, both in terms of actual information, like the charts, and trying to organize thoughts in my mind to figure out where the fuck I'm going to go with them. So, but one thing I did want to, or rather was drawn to kind of go into more, is a Uranian connection with the GC. I have mentioned before that I do feel like the GC has ties to all of the transpersonal planets, all of the outer planets. I certainly talked about, I know Chiron is not a planet, it is an asteroid, but it would be considered like the bridge to the outer planets. I do feel like the GC has an affinity for Chiron. And I feel like the GC has an affinity for Uranus especially, but Neptune and Pluto as well. But I have talked about in the past, I do feel like out of all of the outer planets, Uranus does seem like the one that has the most affinity for the GC. To me, it does. But that's not to say that Pluto certainly does. I certainly feel Pluto energy from it. And I even feel Neptune energy from it too, but Neptune is a little cloudier as it is. So I'm still trying to kind of figure out how. But it certainly has a Neptune vibe to it as well. But I kind of wanted to take the Uranus angle and kind of run with it here. Kind of look at it. So I started looking at all of the charts of all of the people, and I wanted to see how many people, I was just curious what number I was looking at here, what percentage of people have Uranus somewhere involved with the GC axis, whether that be conjunct the GC, opposing the GC. I'm not looking at the squares yet in any major detail, as I mentioned in another video, but I did want to see how many we had that had squares. There are a couple, with Uranus being square the GC, and also people that had Uranus retrograde in their chart, because as I've mentioned before, I do feel like retrograde motion also has an affinity for the GC. So I was curious what the percentage was of people that had either Uranus retrograde or Uranus involved with the GC axis in some way versus it's not really a competition, but you know what I mean. People that don't have Uranus retrograde or Uranus involved at all with the GC axis. Now, what I came back with was 60% had Uranus retrograde and or involved with the GC axis in some way, conjunct, opposing, square. We didn't have any trines, but I would have taken that into consideration here too. Since the trines, I do think, is how the GC stuff is brought down to earth. And then there were 40% of people that didn't have Uranus doing any of those things in their chart. So then I started thinking about, which this is over half, so I'm going to keep running with this. I'm going to keep going with this train of thought because it is over half. I didn't look at the out of bounds thing. I didn't look at the out of bounds thing. I just was strictly looking at Uranus retrograde and Uranus involved with the GC axis. But now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have looked at the out of bounds thing too. Sorry, sometimes I feel like I'm going like cross-eyed from from looking at all the charts. But I probably will look at that at some point because that probably should be played in too. But it makes me think that Uranus, like, it's kind of like, I kind of think of it in the way that I think of Chiron with the GC. It's an amplifier. Kind of in the same way. Now, Jupiter retrograde, I think, is an amplifier too. But I think I won't lie. I think Jupiter retrograde is the most important amplifier here. I really do. I also think it's a protective element for these people. I mean, obviously not all of people are going to be whistleblowers or whatever, but I do think that Jupiter retrograde kind of provides these people, these GC inclined people with conjunctions to the GC, oppositions maybe. I think it does provide maybe not the oppositions, but the conjunctions, it does provide them like a protective element. But it also is an amplifier too. I think it's the biggest amplifier. However, I would also think of, and it's the amplifier that I would look for first. However, Uranus being involved with the GC axis in some way, or Uranus being retrograde, involved with the axis or not, I think Uranus being retrograde just somewhere random in the chart probably also amplifies. I almost think of it as like an auxiliary amplifier for the GC, if you will. Kind of like Chiron. I kind of think of Chiron in the same way. Like Chiron retrograde, for instance, Chiron retrograde on its own may not tap somebody into the GC. It may or may not. Uranus retrograde may or may not tap someone into the GC energy. But if that person has other GC connections, like if they have like conjunctions to the GC or oppositions to the GC or what have you, I feel like Uranus retrograde would be an amplifier there. Like it would amplify that even more. Same with Chiron retrograde, regardless of where it is in the chart. And if Uranus retrograde or Chiron retrograde happen to be involved with the GC axis, it probably amplifies it even more. That's kind of the way that I'm going with it in my mind. Or I'm thinking of them along similar lines. I'm thinking of them in kind of a similar way, in this way. So they're definitely something that I would look at in somebody's chart that already had like GC conjunctions or oppositions to see if Uranus exists retrograde or exists involved with the GC axis. but I don't automatically think that it necessarily taps that person in on its own. I'm on the still thinking about that one. But if the person has GC contacts, it will, I think it does amplify those GC contacts. Now, I also, because I pulled the chart for, I'm looking at my blog post to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. So, like with Chiron, when I talked about Chiron, I also wanted to pull the chart for Uranus's discovery, when it was discovered. It was discovered on March 13th, 1781 by William Herschel. This was in Bath, England at 10:30 p.m. Now, I'll show you the chart. Because like with Chiron, with the Chiron discovery, there are GC connections in this chart. Let me pull it up and show you what I mean. Okay. So this is the chart. As you can see, at the time, the Galactic Center in 1781, it was at like 23 degrees something, Sagittarius. That puts Mars right up its ass. Mars is at 23 something Sagittarius. Saturn is also close by, but I would it's certainly within the window of orb, but I am more focused on Mars just because Mars is so up its ass. Then you have, interestingly enough, you have Uranus opposite the GC. And you also have, you have Chiron. And Chiron is within Chiron's at 3 something Taurus. Because the GC at this time was at 23 degrees Sagittarius, Chiron is within the window that I would be looking at for a trine. In the case of this particular chart, because of where the GC is. It's 10 degrees separating from the GC. So it would be within the window of orb that I would be looking at for trines. It's also conjunct the North Node. Now, obviously it has those GC connections with Mars, right? Like Mars is totally fucking the GC and up each other's ass, and so it's lit up that way, right? Uranus on the other end of the chart is interesting because, like I've mentioned, I think that end of the chart, the galactic anticenter, it kind of functions like a lightning rod. This area does get damaged. There is damage there. Because it's like lightning strikes it, right? It's like lightning striking over, energy overflow spilling over to the anticenter and hitting that area or that planet, if there's a planet there, hitting that planet. So there is damage that's caused. However, when that lightning strike happens, when that energy overflow does occur, I almost feel like that area of the chart gets lit up, right? Normally that area it's a calmer area in the sky. There's a lot of space dust and bullshit. It's very blinded by a bright fucking star. So when the lightning strikes the planet or the area, the galactic anticenter, it feels like that planet or that area of light, even if it's sustaining damage, it is being seen. It is being lit up. And not in a blinding bright way, but like, I don't know. It's like shocking. I don't know. But that's what I pictured in my mind, like something getting shocked. But it lights it up and sorry, that was really stupid. It lights it up and allows this to be, allows this planet to be seen. So I think it's interesting that Uranus happened to be in the anticenter at the time that Uranus was discovered, like lightning striking. It makes sense to me. It really does make sense to me. I think it's really cool to see it there at the date and at the time that that Uranus was discovered. It makes sense. Now, obviously Chiron is involved here because of being trine the GC. So Chiron kind of functions as a way to bring the stuff down to earth, if you will. The North Node is a little too far out of orb for me to count as a trine here, but it is conjunct Chiron. So, and you know, Chiron and Uranus do have a tie. They do, because in mythology, Chiron took Prometheus's place. He was being chained to a rock, having his liver pecked up by a bird for all eternity. Prometheus has an affinity for Uranus and for Aquarius energy. So Chiron takes Prometheus's place, and Prometheus is freed, essentially. I think he has to wear a ring or something, or a chain. He wears something to show, so that Zeus can still, so Zeus can have control of, something like that, have control of him or something like that. But he is freed. So Chiron and Uranus do have a tie as it is, through mythology, through the notion of Prometheus having an affinity for Uranian and Aquarian energy. So there is something that does feel fitting to me, that Chiron would be the trine planet. There is another trine here in this chart. It is the midheaven, but I would focus more on Chiron here, just because the midheaven is not a planet or a physical body. So I do think that that's interesting, that Chiron happens to be what helps bring Uranian stuff down to Earth, or, you know, GC stuff from when Uranus was discovered down to Earth. I think that's an interesting tie. So there are some really cool links here. Now, I'll also say this. I did look at the charts for Neptune, for Neptune's discovery, and for Pluto's discovery. Pluto's discovery is a little bit more like Neptune's discovery. Neptune was actually discovered before it was discovered. Like, it was seen before it was discovered. So I'm actually not really sure which chart to go with there. I know the one on astro.com is the one in the 1800s, but I'm actually not sure if the one from when it was first seen, before they really knew what Neptune was, if that's actually the chart that should be gone with here, since that was when it was first seen, even though they didn't know what it was. So I'm actually not really sure which one to look at here in that case. Pluto, there aren't any GC contacts, though, with the Pluto discovery chart. Though this doesn't really surprise me, because like I've said, I do feel like while the GC has ties to all of the transpersonal planets, I do feel like Uranus is the one it ties to the most. And Chiron, it ties to Chiron too, which Chiron is, like I said before, the bridge to the transpersonals, to the outer planets. So it doesn't really surprise me that much, that the charts for Neptune's discovery and Pluto's discovery don't have the same kind of GC contacts. And I'm not sure that that really matters here. Because I've kind of always, I know I've mentioned it before, I kind of have always thought that Uranus was they're all important, but in terms of, I do feel like Uranus is probably the most important. So I would have been, if Uranus hadn't had these, if the Uranus discovery hadn't had these kinds of contacts, I might have been like, that's interesting. I just didn't know it would flow together this nicely. So anyway, I'm gonna get going because this one got kind of long. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck with Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Apaturno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and like our shit and all kinds of stuff, go to search for Let's Fuck with Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck with Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.